Here's the story.
Well, I've lived all over the western New Jersey, northwestern New Jersey. I lived in Frenchtown, and this pipeline is supposed to cross the creek that's right behind the cabin that I used to rent in Frenchtown, and it's a beautiful place. There's no way a pipeline should be going there. This is about profit for a gas company. That's it. At the cost to all of the citizens along the route, there's nothing in it for them.
Good evening. My name is Maya Van Rossum. I'm the Delaware River Keeper, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Delaware River, the Delaware River Keeper Network, and all of the communities who depend upon and care about our beautiful Delaware River and the tributary streams you find within its watershed. Penn East will inflict a significant and enduring level of harm to the ecology, the economies, the history, health, safety, and quality of life of our communities. And yet there is no demonstrable or defensible community need for the Penn East pipeline or the gas that it will pass. And that means that if this region were to invest in clean energy technologies, it would create and sustain a significantly higher number of jobs and benefits than if the pipeline is built. And at the same time, we will be protecting the lives and the jobs that are created and sustained by our healthy ecological systems. Our clean and healthy Delaware River supports over $22 billion of annual economic benefit and hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs every single year. And that is, of course, in addition to the pure, clean, healthy drinking water it supplies to over 17 million people, the unrivaled recreation, the irreplaceable beauty, education, and quality of life contributions it already makes as a member of our community. Any NEPA analysis, do not interrupt me, sir. Awesome. Any NEPA analysis needs to compare their benefits, the benefits of preserving our river, our watershed, and our communities, to irreparably harming them. Any valid NEPA analysis will determine
The right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment are inherent and indefeasible rights that belong to all of us, we the people, by virtue of the fact that we are here on Earth. They are not rights that were given to us by Article 1, Section 27 in Pennsylvania. They are simply rights that were acknowledged by Article 1, Section 27 by the Environmental Rights Amendment, and that made very clear that every level of government has an obligation, a substantive obligation, to proactively protect our right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. But even more than that, the conservative Pennsylvania Supreme Court said these are rights that don't just belong to the people here today, but they belong to all the future generations yet to come, which really raises the bar of protection. But the thing for New Jersey, for Delaware, for other states across the nation, is that point that these are inherent and indefeasible rights, which means it doesn't matter where on Earth you are. You have a right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And so that's part of what we are battling for.
If we invest in sustainable infrastructure, every morning when the sun rises and the wind blows, we will be blessed and enriched with bright, clean, fresh
of environmental protection laws are failing us. They are focused on managing pollution and managing degradation and managing environmental harm through things like permits. They are not focused on preventing pollution and preventing harm. And as a result, we have communities across the nation that are suffering very deeply. They've lost their health, the quality of their lives, the peace and sanctity of their homes, their property values. Jobs have been impacted and locally economies. People's health and safety have been lost because our government officials have been focusing again on pollution and degradation as a necessary evil that's going to happen, so just how do we manage it rather than how do we prevent it. And a green amendment that recognizes and honors the right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment as an inalienable right in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution changes all of that. It focuses the government on preventing pollution and preventing harm, and it also empowers people in their hearts and their minds because they're no longer hoping that their government officials would do the right thing when it comes to environmental protection. They go into meetings and they go into boardrooms and they go into hearing rooms expecting that their government officials are going to do the right thing, and when it doesn't happen, rising up firmly and passionately and demanding it, just like we rise up firmly and passionately when any other constitutional right is violated. So it changes the landscape entirely.
Because it's a promise.
Yeah, and what it is, it's a right. We people here on this earth have a right to a healthy environment. We have a right to have that expectation. And we all know it in our hearts. If you go into any community and you ask somebody, do you have a right to expect that when you get a glass of water out of your faucet, or your child gets a glass of water out of your faucet, that that glass of water is going to be free of toxins that are going to give you cancer or make you ill? They say, absolutely. Do you have a right when you breathe in air to know that what you're breathing in is not going to make you fall down on the ground with an asthma attack or a heart attack or any sort of horrible illness? Or that when you eat food, you're not ingesting dangerous toxins that have been placed in the soil by humans? And everybody says, absolutely. Everybody recognizes that we as people here on this earth have a right to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And sadly, what they don't realize is you may have a right in your heart and in your mind, you may have an inalienable right, but you don't have a constitutional right. And here in the United States of America, if you don't have a constitutional right, then you do not have the level of respect or protection you need to ensure that you truly have access to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment.
What are your thoughts about the environment? When somebody mentions the environment, what are your thoughts?
Kind of like wild animals, wildlife, and our whole world is our environment and how it's being crushed down from things that we are doing.
Are you concerned about the environment?
Very much, yes.
What are your thoughts about the environment? When people mention the environment, what comes to mind for you?
Well, it depends. Sometimes I get happy, just like thinking about like nature and like all the things that you can do and have fun. Like I actually live in the woods. Like so I just basically grew up as part of the environment. But a lot of the time it also makes me super angry about the fact that bits of it are being destroyed every single day, every single hour, every single minute, every single second. And with the way things are going recently, my anger is sort of winning.
The biggest problem, I'd say, is global warming because it has such an impact on so many people's lives and the world. Like the fires that are happening in California, the oceans rising, animals eating plastic, littering, it's a lot of stuff.
Do you think that all people and all living things on the earth deserve clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Because we're all alive. We all breathe air, clean or not. We all drink water, clean or not. And that, in a way, just connects everybody.
we're all beings. We all live on this planet together. We all share the same environment, whether or not we like it or not. We do. Now we can either sit back and ignore that fact and let the world crash and burn and die, or we can do something about it and live together peacefully.
Does it surprise you that there isn't like an amendment that says that all people are entitled to clean air, clean water, and healthy environment? There isn't one yet.
Not really. The government's evil.
Yes, I think that does surprise me. It's like anything else. You need water and clean air to live, and without that, there's just nothing. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be a child, it could be adult, it could be an elder. It doesn't matter. It could be another species. We all need clean air and water, so why not have that in our Constitution? We should have it set in stone.
Article 1, Section 27 of Pennsylvania's Constitution really inspires people in ways that are hard to describe. I watch people all the time get up at public meetings in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and one of the first things they do when they're reciting testimony about an environmental issue is they quote Article 1, Section 27, and very powerfully use it to remind legislators that we, the people, have a right to pure water and clean air and a healthy environment. And it becomes the perfect segue into any conversation, any testimony, any advocacy, any successful litigation effort that involves the environment.
Keeping pace with the growing population and industrial expansion was the thoughtless but systematic pollution of our great God-given natural resource, the waters of our Commonwealth. Yes, this is polluted water, polluted from many sources, a natural resource with its value greatly impaired and almost destroyed.
What happened was that the people of Pennsylvania woke up to the fact that they've been raped by the coal companies and the steel companies and railroad. Their landscape, their environment had been ravished and exploited bitterly. And television and all the events made them realize that in a way. They kind of like a sleeping giant, the people woke up and said, enough is enough.
Why can't we get any decent drinking water in this town anymore?
They shouldn't be allowed to dump all that crud in our trout stream.
All we want is a place to swim near home.
How can you expect me to stay in business here if I can't even use this water in my plant?
You know, you had these comb banks, thousands of miles of comb banks in the Northeast and the Southwest. You have the acid mine drainage streams. People saw that. They were sick and tired of it. It occurred to me we needed to have something stronger than a statute, because while statutes were very popular and relatively easy to pass, it could be just as easily unpassed or amended. So I thought we needed something higher than that. And the thing came together on a Saturday afternoon in 1968 when I was reading the New York Times on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee, and I saw that New York was about to amend its constitutional provision dealing with forests. I said, wait a second, why doesn't Pennsylvania have a constitutional amendment on the environment? And I spent that winter thinking about it and putting it together, and I came up with the idea that we ought to have, first of all, a Declaration of Rights, as in the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution. We ought to have a public ownership in the natural resources like the Susquehanna River. And thirdly, we ought to make the state of Pennsylvania, the governments of Pennsylvania, that is the state and local governments, the trustees of these resources for future generations. So I introduced it in 1969. And it passed unanimously in both houses, but with 5 amendments. And then the second time around, it has to go through 2 sessions, as you know. We brought it out in 1971, and it passed in time to go on the ballot in May of 1971. And it passed on May the 18th, 1971 by a vote of 1,000,000 to 250,000, 4-1. The public was so upset with the way the coal companies and the railroad companies and the steel companies had raped and exploited the state for a century. They were saying this is enough is enough.
Having been involved in a number of lawsuits where individual families squared off against very, very large oil and gas corporations, it was never a level playing field. Never. Trying to think of the phrase that the military uses. Unsymmetric warfare. That's what it was. You got the big guns. You got the largest law firms hired by big companies trying to literally obliterate families who just wanted clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment, really. And more often than not, well, you know how that turns out. At the very best, what happened was a secret agreement, right? Sealed. We hear a lot more about those today, where the company would say, okay, just shh, we'll give you something, go away. Which means the problems were never addressed. The problems were just passed on to another family. It's like the Catholic priest who got just assigned to another parish, right? Shh. Okay. You, family, shut up. Next family? That's the analogy I like to use. It's pretty sick, isn't it? But it's true. But what the Green Amendment offers is leveling, because it's now said at the level of the Constitution of the state, you can't mistreat those people the way you have been mistreating them from a legal point of view. And it's not just a small town lawyer arguing against some Brooks Brothers suited legal team out of Washington. It's now the Constitution of this state is telling you that you can't do what you've done to them. That's leveling the playing field. I can't wait. I can't wait to see things like that happen.
So fast forward 42 years later. So in 2012, the Pennsylvania legislators passed a very devastating piece of legislation that came to be known as Act 13 that was an incredible gift basket to the fracking industry.
It was as if a governor and his legislature had thought up all the evils that they could put into one bill, compress them, and know that they were going to get it. And so, yeah, disgust, anger, anguish, fear. To think that at that point in time, which was now almost 10 years into shale gas in Pennsylvania, so there was plenty of experience. By 2012, there were probably 7,000 shale gas wells that had been drilled in Pennsylvania. To think that they didn't already have the experience to know that there were impacts, not that there might be, that there had been impacts to people's water, to clean air, to spills, to health effects. They knew that by then. They didn't have to wait for 1,900 publications. There were already a few hundred by then that were shining bright lights on this is a heavy industrial activity that you're allowing to occur in the backyards of families, next door to schools, next to malls. And you're giving that industry, a heavy industry that has a huge climate and environmental impact, carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want, wherever the hell they want, whenever they want, with protections.
Things were going to get a lot worse if Act 13 was allowed to stand. Maybe we were in a moment in time when the fracking industry had so overreached in how they sought to abuse the environmental rights and the people of Pennsylvania with the passage of Act 13 that we could get the courts to reconsider Article 1, Section 27 and those 42 years of precedent where they had misinterpreted and misapplied the law. you know, so when we decided we were going to use Article 1, Section 27 as a focal point of our challenge against Act 13, from the rest of the environmental community, it was met with a high level of dismissiveness. It was, you know, I can remember some of the conversations, people telling me outright, you shouldn't do that. You're going to lose. Almost, again, like as though we were being ridiculous that we were trying to use Article 1, Section 27 to challenge Act 13. But whenever anybody, including those skeptics, heard Jordan talk about Article 1, Section 27 in the context of Act 13, they were transformed. And you could see it. You could see it in the moment. You could see it in their eyes. Because, again, he had a clarity of truth and knowledge and awareness that would just overwhelm the skeptics.
I was really at that stage in my career, I was primarily a civil rights lawyer. And as a civil rights lawyer, you're used to looking to the Constitution. The Constitution is where we find our core rights that protect the people from government overreach. And so we had municipalities that were protecting people by and protecting people's environmental interests by having zoning laws in place. When the legislature tried to take that away and tried to tell every municipality in the state that they had to allow fracking in every zoning district, it was natural to me to look to the Constitution to say, you're taking away local government's ability to protect people. And the Constitution is the highest law of the land, and so the state can't do that. The state can't take any action that would violate the Constitution. So the law was signed by then Governor Corbett on Valentine's Day of 2012. It was heard in the courts in a very expedited way. So we got through Commonwealth Court, which was the intermediate appellate court, and we argued it in the Supreme Court by October 2012, which was very quickly. But then we had to wait until December of 2013 to get a decision. So we've been waiting for a decision for a long time at that point. I got a call from the court saying they were ready to issue their decision. We kind of got a heads up before it became public. It was 160 pages written by Justice Castile. And, you know, it's kind of like cramming for a test in college. You got to quick find where the actual answer is. So thumbed through it quick, figured out that we won, just meaning we struck down the law, and then figuring out that they had given life to that the court had given life to the Environmental Rights Amendment for the first time. So it was it was very exciting.
When it came up to us, it had been through some pretty extensive dealings with the lower courts, and this group here, the fracking people that came in, they said, "Oh, we're not going to do any of that. We're going to be, everything's going to be, you know, you hardly know we're here," and that would be impossible because we're talking about. Originally, they were talking about 50,000 of these wells across the state of Pennsylvania. So there really was no way that they could absolutely control that. And we even had one incident where this wastewater from fracking, a couple of drivers decided not to drive the wastewater to Ohio, and they dumped it in a stream in upstate PA, and that happened to be one of the finest trout streams in the state of Pennsylvania, which Pennsylvania is known for their trout streams internationally, and it killed everything within 3 miles. And of course, they got fined and everything, but the damages was impossible. So this constitutional amendment had not been applied barely at all in the legislative years, the 40 years since the thing had been passed, until we got this. And we looked at it, and we looked at our Constitution. We said pretty clearly that you overstepped the bounds. You know, you took away people's rights. So I wrote this 156-page opinion that said you got to go back and do it right.
And as a result, we secured a decision that not only restored the constitutional right to a healthy environment to the people of Pennsylvania, but in so doing, and at the same time, defeated some of the most devastating aspects of Act 13. And so while fracking does still continue in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we are having to do the work of continuing to hold that industry accountable for their insults and assaults on the environment and on communities, we prevented a whole wealth of devastating harms that would have resulted if Act 13 was allowed to stand. But you know, the thing is, I'm pretty quick to get on to the next step. So when you asked me how did I feel in the moment, I think I felt it for a moment. And then it was really like, okay, now what do we do with this? What would you say to that senator to convince them, senator to senator, legislator to legislator, to convince them that how fundamentally important this is for them, their legacy, and future generations?
Well, I would refer them to Ann Thompson's report on NBC of a week ago about Lake Hopatcong. She had a story of about 5 minutes long on a Sunday morning. She said, if you want to find out about climate change, you don't have to go to the North Pole or Iceland. You just go to Lake Hopatcong in New Jersey and see what climate change has done to the water there, to the new algae blooms, to the fact there's no more ice fishing, that the boating is down. It's hitting New Jersey. It's hitting Lake Hopatcong pretty badly. And she fully documented that, so that's what I would tell them. Now, what are you going to do about that? And this is one thing you can do. You can't stop climate change by yourself, but it's pretty gets things going for New Jersey. That's what I would say.
Do you agree that it's important to protect the rights to clean water and clean air, a stable environment in our Constitution, like we recognize and protect our other fundamental rights?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I think we'll get we draw some odd lines in the sand in our society. You know, somebody rightfully, I think, and we should applaud this at some point, determined that K through 12 public education for all kids in America was a right, but not before K or after 12. And we're challenging that in New Jersey. Who determined that health care was a lesser imperative than education, and therefore that is viewed too often as a privilege and not a right. I think you could put the access to clean air and clean water in a similar category. I don't know why we would make that distinction. What is that? Why is that different? I'm not sure we can single-handedly undo the Constitution or redo the Constitution, but at least notionally, I think we have to think about it in a similar vein as we do access to public education.
You know, in the state of Pennsylvania, they actually have a green amendment that ensures that Pennsylvania residents are entitled to clean air, clean water, and healthy environment. What do you think about that as an idea?
It's a good idea. I haven't thought about it per se. I'm not familiar with the amendment in Pennsylvania, but the notion at least is something that I would feel very much open to.
Next time on Here's the Story.
Clean water, clean air, uncontaminated land, all of those things should be guaranteed in the Constitution.
We talk far less than we should about the environmental impacts in underserved communities. We want to be just as committed to the environment in an urban community as we are in the great vistas of our state.
We need justice for everybody in every community, and we're not going to get there unless it's recognized by the state through the Green Amendment.
I think the kids in Trenton, they deserve a healthy environment, both clean water and clean air and clean land. I think that there has to be a whole cultural shift that environment is a priority and that it's a fact of life.
The fact is, seeing these millions of younger people are making a valid point, and we older people should pay attention to it and get moving with it.
You are acting against the welfare and the health of your children and grandchildren, not somebody else's, your own.
I don't want to just exist. I want to be able to live.
Why not have the right to clean air and clean water? You know, we need those a lot more than we need our free speech, to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, having that would just be what we've needed for a long time.
We are the first generation who will experience climate change, but we're also the last generation who will be able to do something about it.